They called the Alpha King infertile. They said every woman who married him was cursed to fail. So when the council forced a quiet Omega into his arms, the kingdom waited for her to break. But on the first night, the Alpha's wolf didn't growl, it knelt. And months later, the so-called barren king was about to shatter every law of fate with 3 heartbeats where there should have been none. In the world of werewolves, there are laws written in stone and laws written in blood. The stone laws govern territories, hierarchies, succession, but the blood laws, those come from something deeper, something primal, the bond between an alpha and their wolf. And when that bond is broken, when wolf and human are at war within the same body, no amount of power can save them. This is the story of Alpha King Kael Drakemore, whose wolf rejected every mate the kingdom offered, earning him the title of infertile and cursed. This is the story of Mireya, a quiet Omega who was forced into marriage as punishment, expected to fail like all the others. And this is the story of what happened when an Alpha's wolf finally found what it had been searching for all along. Not submission, not dominance, but balance. The kingdom of Silvercrest was the jewel of the werewolf realm. Ancient bloodlines, powerful packs, a ruling class that had held power for 10 generations through strength, strategy, and the sacred bond between alpha and wolf. At the center of it all sat the throne, and on that throne sat Alpha King Kael Drakemore. He was everything an Alpha King should be, powerful beyond measure, strategic in battle, commanding in presence. His wolf was massive, larger than any seen in 3 generations, with midnight black fur and eyes that glowed like molten gold. He should have been unstoppable. Instead, he was cursed. The whispers started after his first political marriage at age 22. Lady Bianca of the Eastern Territories, a high-ranking alpha female chosen by the council to unite 2 powerful bloodlines, beautiful, educated, perfectly suited for the throne. The wedding was magnificent. The kingdom celebrated for 3 days, and on the 4th day, Kael's wolf rejected her. Not gently, not quietly. It happened during the traditional bonding ceremony, when the Alpha King and his chosen queen were meant to complete their mate bond under the full moon before the assembled court. Bianca had stepped forward, baring her neck in the traditional gesture of acceptance, and Kael's wolf surged forward with such violent rejection that it took 6 guards to hold him back from killing her. The bond was severed before it could form. Bianca was banished to the Eastern Territories in disgrace, and Kael was left standing in the sacred grove, his wolf snarling at anyone who came near. "A wolf that won't bond can't rule," the council had muttered. "This is a bad sign." But Kael was already crowned, already Alpha King. They couldn't remove him without civil war. So they tried again. Lady Morgana of the Southern Forests, a warrior alpha known for her strength and tactical mind. Surely she could handle the wild wolf within their king. The same thing happened. The moment she tried to establish dominance, to mark him, to claim him as hers, his wolf went berserk. This time, Morgana barely escaped with her life. 2 more marriages followed over the next 8 years, 2 more rejections. By the time Kael reached 30, the pattern was undeniable. Every woman the council chose was powerful, dominant, alpha-blooded, and every single one was rejected. "The king is infertile," nobles whispered at court gatherings. "His wolf is broken. He'll never produce an heir." "It's a curse," others claimed, "punishment for some sin we don't know about." "The bloodline ends with him," still others predicted. "When he dies, the kingdom will tear itself apart, choosing a successor." The council grew increasingly desperate. They needed Kael to produce an heir, to prove the Drakemore line could continue. But how could an alpha who couldn't bond ever produce children? In werewolf law, conception was nearly impossible without a completed mate bond. Oh, it could happen. There were rare cases of unbonded wolves conceiving, but the chances were minuscule. And Kael's wolf wouldn't bond, wouldn't even tolerate another wolf's touch. It had been 3 years since the last marriage attempt. 3 years of Kael ruling alone, his council growing more agitated, the kingdom whispering that their powerful king was fundamentally broken. Kael heard the whispers. He ignored them. What else could he do? His wolf had made its position clear. It would accept no mate the council chose. And Kael had stopped trying to force the issue. If he was cursed to rule alone, then so be it. At least alone, he hurt no one but himself. Mireya lived in the mountain village of Ashenvale, 3 days' journey from the capital. She was 24 years old, an omega of unremarkable lineage and perfectly content with her quiet life. She worked as a teacher for the village children, tended a small garden, and spent her evenings reading by the fire. She had friends, a modest cottage left to her by her grandmother, and no ambitions beyond living peacefully. The problem started when the council issued a new decree. All omega females between the ages of 18 and 30 must register with the Royal Census Office for potential selection as royal companions. The decree was thinly veiled desperation. The council hoped that if they couldn't force the Alpha King to bond with powerful alphas, perhaps a submissive omega would succeed where dominance had failed. Most omegas registered without complaint. It was law, after all. But Mireya stood in the village square and calmly, respectfully refused. "The decree is unconstitutional," she said to the royal enforcer who'd come to collect registration forms. "I'm citing constitutional law, Section 12, Clause 4. No wolf may be conscripted for breeding purposes without consent. This decree violates that protection." The enforcer stared at her. "You're refusing a direct order from the council?" "I'm citing constitutional law," Mireya corrected gently. "There's a difference." A crowd had gathered. Omegas weren't supposed to challenge authority. They were supposed to be submissive, compliant, gentle. And Mireya was all those things, except when law was being broken. "If you don't register," the enforcer warned, "there will be consequences." "Then I accept those consequences, but I won't register for a program that treats omegas like breeding stock." The enforcer left, and 3 days later, a royal summons arrived. Mireya was ordered to appear before the council in the capital to answer for her defiance. Her friends begged her to apologize, to register, to do whatever it took to avoid the council's wrath. But Mireya had read the kingdom's laws cover to cover. She knew her rights. So she traveled to the capital, stood before the assembled council of powerful alphas and nobles, and repeated what she'd said in the village square. "The decree is unconstitutional. I won't comply with an illegal order." The council was furious. An omega challenging them publicly, using their own laws against them? Unacceptable. "You dare question the authority of this council?" Lord Theron demanded, the head counselor. "I question a decree that violates constitutional law, not your authority as council members." "You think you're clever," another counselor spat, "quoting laws at us like you have any power here." "I don't claim power," Mireya replied. "I claim rights. There's a difference." The council conferred in hushed, angry whispers. Finally, Lord Theron smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Very well,"
he said. You refuse to register for the Royal Companion Program. You invoke your constitutional rights. We acknowledge those rights. Mireya's instincts prickled. This was too easy.
However, Theron continued, there's another law you seem to have overlooked. The Law of Noble Obligation, Section 7. Any wolf who challenges a royal decree may be subject to direct royal assignment as recompense. Mireya's blood ran cold. You challenged our decree, Theron said, his smile widening. So we're exercising our right to assign you directly to the king himself. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. You will marry Alpha King Kael, Theron announced, immediately, as recompense for your defiance and as service to the kingdom. That's not, Mireya started. It's perfectly legal, Theron interrupted, unlike the decree you so boldly challenged. This is direct assignment under established law. You wanted to cite constitutional protections? Well, we're citing them right back. Mireya understood immediately what they were doing. They were punishing her, using her own argument against her, and sending her to the infertile king as a cruel joke. She would fail, like all the others. She would be rejected, humiliated, probably exiled. And the council would have made their point. Don't challenge us. Do you accept this assignment, or shall we charge you with treason for refusing a direct royal decree? Mireya looked at the faces around her, powerful wolves who had just outmaneuvered her completely. She could refuse, accept the treason charge, but that meant imprisonment, possibly death. Or she could accept this assignment and face the Alpha King whose wolf had rejected every woman before her. Either way, she lost, but at least one way, she lived. I accept, Mireya said quietly. The council's satisfaction was palpable. Excellent, Theron said. The wedding will take place in 3 days. We'll see if the king's cursed wolf has any better luck with a defiant Omega than it did with proper alpha females. The mockery in his voice was unmistakable. They expected her to fail. They wanted her to fail. And standing there in the council chamber, Mireya made a quiet decision. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Whatever happened with the Alpha King, she would face it with dignity. She wouldn't break, wouldn't beg, wouldn't give the council the spectacle they were hoping for, even if it killed her. Kael learned about his new wife approximately 2 hours before the wedding. He was in his study, reviewing border security reports, when Lord Theron arrived with the council. "Your Majesty," Theron said, with barely concealed smugness, "we have wonderful news. You're getting married. Today." Kael didn't even look up from his reports. "No, I'm not." "It's already arranged. The Omega has accepted. The ceremony is set for sunset." "Then unarrange it." Kael set down his papers and fixed the council with a cold stare. "I'm not interested in another political marriage. My wolf has made its position abundantly clear." "This isn't a political marriage. It's a punishment." That got Kael's attention. "Explain." The council told him about Mireya, her refusal to register, her constitutional arguments, their decision to assign her to the king as recompense. "So you're using an Omega as a pawn to make a political point," Kael said flatly. "We're using an insubordinate wolf to serve the kingdom," Theron corrected. "If she's going to challenge our authority, she can do so from the palace, under your supervision." Kael understood immediately. They expected his wolf to reject her, expected her to fail, be humiliated, and serve as an example to any other wolves who thought about challenging council decrees. They were using both of them. "And if I refuse?" Kael asked. Then we'll be forced to charge the Omega with treason. She did, after all, refuse a royal decree. Theron's smile was thin. Surely you wouldn't want an innocent wolf imprisoned because you couldn't be bothered with a simple wedding ceremony. It was a trap. Accept the marriage and the council got their spectacle when his wolf inevitably rejected another mate. Refuse, and an Omega who'd simply cited constitutional law would be imprisoned for treason. Kael closed his eyes briefly. His wolf stirred, curious about this Omega who dared challenge the council. "Let them bring her," his wolf rumbled. "We'll see." "Fine," Kael said aloud. "I'll marry her. But when my wolf rejects her, and it will, she's not to be punished. She'll be given an estate, a stipend, and freedom to live however she chooses. Those are my terms." "Agreed," Theron said, too quickly. They thought he was being soft, sentimental. They didn't realize Kael was simply tired of watching innocent people suffer for his wolf's choices. "The ceremony is at sunset," Theron repeated. "Don't be late, Your Majesty." Mireya stood in a guest chamber of the palace, staring at the wedding dress they'd provided. It was beautiful, pale silver silk with intricate beading, fit for a Luna. It was also a costume for a performance she wanted no part of. But she'd accepted this, made her choice. So she put on the dress, let the attendants style her hair, and walked to the throne room with her head held high. The ceremony was small, no celebration, no guests beyond the council members who'd orchestrated this farce. And at the end of the long carpet stood Alpha King Kael. Mireya had seen portraits, of course. Everyone had. But portraits didn't capture the sheer presence of him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of controlled power that made even other alphas nervous. His hair was dark, almost black, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they tracked her approach with an intensity that should have been frightening. But Mireya had faced down a council of hostile alphas. She wouldn't falter now. She reached the end and stood beside him. Up close she could feel his power radiating like heat, could sense his wolf just beneath the surface, watching her with those golden eyes that didn't quite match his human gray ones. The officiant spoke the traditional words. Kael responded in a deep, even voice. Mireya echoed the phrases she'd been taught an hour ago. And then it was done. "By the power vested in me," the officiant intoned, "I pronounce you king and queen, Alpha and Luna. May the moon bless your union." The council watched with barely concealed anticipation. This was the moment it always happened, the moment the Alpha King's wolf rejected its new mate. Kael turned to face Mireya fully. His eyes had shifted, more gold than gray now. His wolf was surfacing. Mireya stood very still, her heart pounding. "This is it," she thought. "This is where I find out how brutal a rejection feels." Kael's wolf looked at her, and very slowly, very deliberately, it lowered its gaze. Not in aggression, not in dominance, in acknowledgement. The throne room went absolutely silent, because alpha wolves didn't lower their gaze, especially not the Alpha King's wolf, and especially not to an Omega. Kael blinked, and his eyes returned to their normal gray. He looked as shocked as everyone else. "The ceremony is complete," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "The council is dismissed." "But, Your Majesty," Theron sputtered, "the bonding ceremony will happen in private. Leave." It wasn't a request. The council filed out, confusion and frustration written across their faces. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. When the doors closed behind them, Kael turned to Mireya. "That," he said quietly, "has never happened before." "Your wolf lowering its gaze?" my wolf acknowledging another wolf's existence without violence. He studied her with those intense gray eyes. "What are you?" "An Omega who challenged a decree and got punished for it," Mireya said simply. "Nothing more." "No." Kael stepped closer. "You're something more. My wolf has rejected alpha females, beta warriors, even other Omegas who were brought before me. But you—" He paused. "It didn't reject you. Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet." He offered his arm. "Come, I'll show you to your chambers. We can discuss expectations in the morning." Mireya took his arm, noting the warmth of his skin through the fabric of his formal jacket. As they walked through the palace corridors, servants stared openly. The cursed king and his Omega bride, everyone waiting to see how quickly this would fall apart. But that night, for the first time in 8 years, Alpha King Kael's wolf settled into quiet contentment. And in her chambers, Mireya lay awake wondering what she'd just gotten herself into. The first week of Mireya's marriage to the Alpha King was strange. She'd been given chambers in the royal wing, beautiful rooms with a view of the palace gardens, but they were her rooms alone. Kael maintained his own quarters 3 doors down. "We're married in name," he explained that first morning over breakfast, "but I won't force proximity on you, not until we both understand what's happening with my wolf." Mireya appreciated that. Many alphas would have demanded their rights as a husband. Kael simply asked how she took her tea and whether she preferred mornings in the garden or the library. It was civilized, unexpectedly kind. They fell into a routine. Breakfast together. Kael would attend to his royal duties while Mireya explored the palace library. Dinner together, during which they'd discuss everything from border politics to philosophical debates. Kael was brilliant, sharp-minded, and well-read. He listened when she spoke, actually listened, not just waited for his turn to talk. And his wolf appeared every evening, not violently, not aggressively. Kael's eyes would shift to gold, and he'd go very still. His wolf would surface just enough to observe Mireya through his eyes, and every single time it would lower its gaze in that same gesture of acknowledgement. "I don't understand it," Kael admitted one evening as they walked through the gardens. "My wolf has never responded this way to anyone." "Maybe it's tired of fighting," Mireya suggested. "No, it's not submission, it's—" He struggled for words. "Recognition, like it's been waiting for something and finally found it." "What do you think it was waiting for?" "I have no idea." He looked at her. "What did you do differently? The other women who came before you, they tried to establish dominance, tried to tame my wolf, tried to force the bond. But you—" "I haven't tried to do anything," Mireya finished. "I'm just here." "Exactly. You don't try to control me, don't demand anything, don't push for the bond." He paused. "Why not?" "Because you're a person, not a prize to be won," Mireya said simply. "And your wolf is clearly looking for something specific. Until I know what that is, why would I force anything?" Kael stared at her. "You're remarkable, you know that?" She laughed. "I'm really not. I'm just an Omega who knows how to read constitutional law." "You challenged the council, stood up for your rights, refused to back down even when they tried to intimidate you." His voice was warm with admiration. "That's not ordinary, Mireya." Something shifted between them in that moment. A warmth, a connection, the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. 2 months into the marriage, the council demanded a progress report. Lord Farron and his associates arrived at the palace clearly expecting to hear that the marriage had failed. Instead, Kael invited them to dinner, where they found Mireya sitting at the king's right hand, discussing trade agreements with perfect poise. "Your Majesty," Theron said tightly, "we were hoping to discuss the status of your union." "My wife and I are doing quite well," Kael said mildly. "Thank you for your concern." "But has the bond been completed?" "That's private business, Lord Theron. The kingdom has a right to know if the royal line will continue." "The kingdom has no such right," Mireya interrupted gently. "Our personal relationship is not subject to council oversight unless it impacts governance, which it doesn't." Theron's face flushed. "You overstep, Omega." "I'm the queen," Mireya corrected, her voice still soft but firm, "and I'm citing privacy protections outlined in the Royal Family Act, unless you'd like me to quote specific sections." Kael's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. The council had meant to punish Mireya by marrying her to the king. Instead, they'd given her a platform and legal standing she never would have had otherwise. And she was using it beautifully. "The council is dismissed," Kael said. "We'll notify you if any announcements need to be made." After they left, Kael turned to Mireya. "You enjoyed that." "A little," she admitted. "Good. They deserve it after what they did to you." He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "Thank you for standing with me." "We're married," Mireya said. "That means we stand together, even if this wasn't the marriage either of us chose." "No," Kael agreed quietly, "but it might be the marriage we both needed." That night his wolf didn't just lower its gaze, it approached her, slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to retreat. Mireya stood very still as the massive black wolf came close enough to touch. And then it lowered its head and very gently pressed its muzzle against her hand. The first physical contact Kael's wolf had ever initiated with a potential mate. Mireya's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know why this felt so significant, but it did. "Hello," she whispered, gently stroking the wolf's massive head. "It's nice to finally meet you properly." The wolf made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine, something peaceful. And when Kael shifted back to human form, his eyes were wide with wonder. "It's never done that before," he breathed. "I'm honored," Mireya said simply. That night marked a turning point. Kael's wolf had made its choice. Now it was just a matter of time before the bond completed. 3 months after the wedding, the palace staff noticed something strange. The Alpha King's scent was changing. All werewolves had distinctive scents. It was part of how they identified each other, established hierarchies, marked territories. Kael's scent had always been sharp and cold, like winter storms and steel. But now there was warmth to it, depth, like summer nights and ancient forests. "It's the bond," the palace healer whispered to her assistants. "His wolf is preparing to complete the mate bond. His scent is shifting to complement his mates." "But he's the infertile king," one assistant protested. "His wolf doesn't bond." "It didn't bond before, but look at him now." And it was true. Kael moved differently, smiled more. The cold distance he'd maintained for years was melting away. And at the center of it all was Mireya, the quiet Omega who'd challenged a council and won an Alpha King's heart without even trying. They completed the bonding ceremony on the night of the winter solstice, not because the council demanded it, not because tradition required it, but because Kael's wolf finally fully trusted the woman who'd spent months treating it with patient kindness instead of demanding submission. The bonding ceremony was private, just the two of them in the sacred grove where so many previous attempts had failed. Mireya wore a simple white dress, Kael wore formal robes, but there was nothing formal about the way he looked at her. "Are you sure?" he asked for the 3rd time. "Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me, to my wolf, for life." "I'm sure," Mireya said. "Are you?" "I've been sure since the moment my wolf lowered its gaze to you." He cupped her face gently. "You've given me something I thought I'd never have. Peace, partnership, the feeling that I'm not fighting this battle alone. You're not alone, Mireya promised. You never will be again. Under the full moon, they completed the bond. Kael marked her gently, his canine sinking into the traditional place at her shoulder. Mireya marked him in return, her smaller canines leaving a perfect imprint. The bond snapped into place like a golden chain between their souls. And for the first time in his life, Kael's wolf settled into complete, perfect contentment. Afterwards, they lay in the sacred grove, wrapped in each other's arms, feeling the bond pulse between them. The council is going to lose their minds, Kael said with a laugh. Good, they deserve it. My fierce little Omega, he kissed her forehead. What did I do to deserve you? You lowered your gaze, she said simply. You saw me as an equal, not a prize. You gave me choice instead of demanding submission. That's what your wolf needed? That's what we both needed. She pressed closer to him. Balance, Kael. Not dominance, not submission. Balance. Balance, he repeated, as if testing the word. His wolf grumbled agreement. For 8 years it had been searching for this, for her, and now that it had found her, it would never let go. 4 months after the bonding, Mireya began feeling strange. Fatigue, nausea in the mornings, heightened sense of smell. She recognized the symptoms immediately, but dismissed them as impossible. She and Kael were bonded, yes, but conception still required specific circumstances, specific timing. It was too soon, except when the palace healer examined her and went very, very pale, Mireya knew. Your Majesty, the healer whispered, I need to do an ultrasound. Why? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just please lie back. Mireya lay on the examination table while the healer prepared the equipment. The ultrasound machine hummed to life, and then the healer made a sound, half laugh, half sob. Oh my gods! What? What is it? The healer turned the screen so Mireya could see. 3 distinct heartbeats, 3 tiny forms visible on the ultrasound. You're carrying triplets. Your Majesty, you're pregnant with triplets. The world tilted sideways. Triplets? In werewolf culture, triplets were incredibly rare, occurring maybe in 1 in 10,000 births, and they were considered sacred, a sign from the moon goddess herself that a bond was blessed, that a ruler was chosen, that power and prosperity would follow. The last recorded triplet birth in the royal line had been 7 generations ago, and it had marked the beginning of the kingdom's golden age. I need to tell Kael, Mireya whispered. Wait, the healer grabbed her arm. Your Majesty, think carefully about who you tell. This news, it will change everything. The council, the court, the entire power structure of the kingdom. I know. And there will be those who see this as a threat, who will want to... I know, Mireya repeated, firmer this time. But Kael needs to know. He's my mate, the father. He deserves to hear this from me. The healer nodded slowly. Then tell him, but only him, until you're both ready to face what comes next. Mireya found Kael in his study, buried in reports about rogue activity on the northern border. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. What's wrong? You're pale. I need to tell you something. He set down his papers immediately and came to her. Are you ill? Should I call the healer? I just came from the healer. His face went through several emotions in rapid succession. And? Kael, I'm pregnant. He froze, just completely stopped moving. You're what? Pregnant. 4 months along. The healer confirmed it. But how? I mean, I know how, but... He sat down heavily. We've only been bonded for 4 months. That's so fast. Are you sure? She did an ultrasound. There's no doubt. A baby. A smile was breaking across his face, slow at first, then brilliant. We're having a baby. Mireya, we're babies.
she corrected gently. Plural. What? Kael, we're having triplets. The color drained from his face, then returned in a rush, then drained again. Triplets? You're carrying triplets? Yes. Sacred gods. He stood, sat back down, stood again. Triplets. That's... Mireya, do you understand what this means? I know the cultural significance. The council declared me infertile, cursed. They said my line would end with me. They forced you into this marriage expecting you to fail. And now you're carrying triplets, blessed triplets, the sign of divine favor. It's going to change everything, Mireya said quietly. Damn right it will. He pulled her into his arms, gentle but fierce. Every noble who whispered about the cursed king is going to have to eat their words. Every council member who used you as a pawn will have to face what they've done. And everyone who said my wolf was broken will have to acknowledge that it wasn't broken, it was just waiting for you. He pulled back to look at her face. How do you feel? Are you okay? Is this what you want? I'm terrified and overwhelmed, but yes, Kael, this is what I want. You're what I want, our family. He kissed her then, pouring months of love and devotion and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, his eyes were glowing gold. His wolf wanted to see, wanted to know.
Kael knelt before Mireya and very gently placed his hand on her still flat stomach. His wolf surged forward, sensing the 3 tiny lives growing inside their mate. And then it did something Mireya never expected. It bowed, not lowered its gaze, fully bowed. An Alpha King's wolf bowing to the Omega carrying his children. When Kael shifted back to human, there were tears in his eyes. My wolf recognizes them, he whispered. 3 alphas, strong and healthy. It knows them already. 3 alphas? One might be beta or omega, but my wolf is certain of at least 2 alphas among them. He laughed shakily. The infertile king who couldn't produce an heir is about to have 3 of them at once. What do we do now? Mireya asked. Now? Kael stood and pulled her close. Now we prepare. We strengthen security, we announce this to the kingdom on our terms, and we get ready to watch the council lose their collective minds. They're going to see this as a threat. They should, because the Omega they tried to humiliate just became the most important woman in the kingdom. He kissed her forehead, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Kael and Mireya decided to announce the pregnancy at the winter gathering, a formal event where all the high-ranking nobles and council members assembled to discuss kingdom business. It was perfect timing. The gathering was in 2 weeks. Mireya would be almost 5 months along by then, starting to show, and the entire power structure of the kingdom would be present to hear the news. But keeping the secret for 2 weeks proved challenging. Mireya's scent was changing, taking on the distinctive sweetness that marked pregnancy. Her body was shifting, and Kael had become fiercely protective, practically snarling at anyone who came too close to her. The palace staff noticed. Rumors started circulating. By the time the winter gathering arrived, half the kingdom suspected the queen was pregnant, but no one suspected triplets. The great hall was packed. Every noble family, every council member, every important wolf in the kingdom stood in their finery, waiting for the king to address them. Kael stood at the center of the raised dais, Mireya beside him, her hand in his. "Lords and ladies of Silvercrest," Kael began, his voice carrying easily across the hall, "we've gathered to discuss the kingdom's business, to plan for the coming year, to address concerns and celebrate victories." The crowd murmured agreement. "But before we begin formal proceedings, the Queen and I have an announcement." Every eye turned to Mireya. She stood straight and calm, even as her heart pounded. "As many of you have likely noticed, my mate's scent has changed. This is because she carries our child.
Gasps and whispers erupted across the hall. Lord Theron's face was a study in shock and frustration. The king who was declared infertile, the wolf who was called cursed and broken, has been blessed by the moon goddess with children. More whispers, more shock.
But that's not the full announcement, Kael said. He turned to Mireya, and the love in his eyes was unmistakable. She stepped forward and spoke clearly. "We're not having a child. We're having children. Triplets." The hall exploded. Nobles shouted in amazement. Council members went pale. Even the servants lining the walls gasped openly. Triplets, sacred triplets, the sign of divine blessing and true bonded rule, from a king who was supposed to be cursed and an Omega who was supposed to fail. "This is impossible," Lord Theron shouted above the chaos. "The king has never been able to bond, never been able to—" "And yet here we are," Kael interrupted coldly. "My wolf has bonded. My mate is carrying triplet. Perhaps the problem was never with me, Lord Theron. Perhaps it was with the wolves you kept forcing upon me." The implication was clear. The council had spent years choosing dominant alpha females, trying to force Kael into bonds his wolf rejected. And the moment they stopped controlling the situation, the moment an Omega entered his life on different terms, everything changed. "This pregnancy will be protected," Kael continued. "Any threat to my mate or my children will be considered an act of war against the crown. Any attempt to undermine the Queen's position will be met with immediate consequences. Is that understood?" Silence. Then slowly, wolves throughout the hall began to bow, not to the king, to the queen, to Mireya, the Omega who'd achieved the impossible and would now birth the next generation of rulers. Even the council, after a long, tense moment, bowed. They had no choice. Triplets changed everything. After the announcement, Mireya and Kael retreated to their private chambers. "That went better than expected," Mireya said, sinking into a chair. "Did it? Half the council looked like they wanted to challenge me right there. But they didn't, because they can't." She placed a hand on her growing belly. "These babies are sacred, Kael. Even your enemies won't dare threaten them openly." "No, but they'll try other methods." He knelt before her chair, his hands covering hers on her stomach. "I'm going to assign you a personal guard, the best warriors we have, and I want you to stay within the palace grounds until after the birth." "Kael, I'm pregnant, not fragile." "You're carrying the future of this kingdom. That makes you the most valuable target in the realm." His expression was serious. "Please, Mireya, let me protect you." She saw the fear beneath his determination. He'd lost so much already, been rejected so many times. Now that he'd finally found happiness, he was terrified of losing it. "Okay," she agreed softly. "I'll accept the guards. I'll stay in the palace. But Kael, you need to trust that we're going to be fine, all of us." "How can you be so sure?" "Because we're balanced," she said simply. "Your wolf found what it needed. We built something real, and that's stronger than any curse or council scheme." He pressed his forehead to her stomach, and she felt the bond between them pulse with love and fear and desperate hope. "I love you so much." "I love you too." Outside their chambers, the kingdom was already changing. News of the triplets spread like wildfire. The cursed king wasn't cursed after all. The infertile Alpha had found his match, and the quiet Omega who'd challenged a council was about to become the mother of the next generation. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The attacks started 2 weeks after the announcement. Not physical attacks, those would be too obvious. Instead, political ones. Lord Theron and his allies began spreading rumors. The pregnancy wasn't real. The Queen had used magic to fake it. The children weren't the king's. When that didn't gain traction, the palace healer confirmed the pregnancy publicly, and Kael's protective behavior made paternity undeniable. They tried different tactics. They challenged Mireya's fitness to rule, questioned whether an Omega could handle the responsibilities of being queen, suggested that once the children were born, she should step aside and let a proper Luna take over raising them. Kael shut down each attempt with increasing anger. But the real threat came from an unexpected source, a faction of traditionalist wolves who believed that triplets born to a previously cursed king might themselves be cursed. "It's unnatural," they whispered in corners. "His wolf rejected mates for 8 years, and suddenly it accepts an Omega and produces triplets. Something is wrong." The whispers grew louder. Talk of protecting the bloodline by ensuring the children were properly evaluated after birth, which was code for "we want to examine them, judge them, potentially reject them if they don't meet our standards." Mireya was 6 months pregnant when she overheard 2 nobles discussing it in the palace gardens. "Can't let potentially defective children take the throne. The council should demand custody until they're proven healthy." She didn't confront them. Instead, she went directly to Kael. "They're going to try to take our children," she said without preamble. Kael looked up from his desk, his eyes immediately sharpening. "Who?" "The traditionalist faction. They're calling the babies cursed, saying the council should take custody after birth to evaluate them." Kael's eyes flashed gold. His wolf surged forward with protective fury. "Over my dead body. They'll use law against us, claim they're protecting the succession. We need to be ready." Kael stood and began pacing. "We need leverage, something that makes it politically impossible for them to challenge us." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but actually, I might have an idea." 3 days later, Kael called an emergency council session. Every member was required to attend. When they assembled, they found the king standing at the head of the table with a stack of documents. "Gentlemen, we have a problem. It's come to my attention that several of you have been discussing taking custody of my children upon their birth." "Your Majesty, we merely suggested proper evaluation."
"You suggested removing newborn children from their mother under the guise of protecting the bloodline." Kael's voice was ice. "Let me be absolutely clear. That will not happen. The council has a right. The council has no rights regarding my children." Kael spread the documents across the table. "But since you seem concerned about bloodlines and succession, let's discuss these." The council members leaned forward to look. Financial records, property deeds, letters, all showing various council members engaged in illegal activities, embezzlement, bribery, manipulation of succession laws for personal gain. Lord Theron's face went ashen. "Where did you get these?" "I've been investigating for months," Kael said. "Did you really think I didn't notice your attempts to undermine my rule, your schemes to position yourselves for power? This is evidence," Kael interrupted. "Evidence that I will release to the kingdom if any of you continue to threaten my family. Try to take my children, and I'll expose every illegal deal, every bribed official, every law you've broken." "You wouldn't dare. It would destabilize the kingdom." "Then don't make me." Kael leaned forward, his hands on the table, his wolf very close to the surface. "My mate and my children are off limits. Attack them, threaten them, even speak against them, and I will burn your political careers to ash. Are we understood?" Silence. Then, one by one, the council members nodded. "Good." Kael gathered up the documents. "This session is adjourned. And gentlemen, if I hear one more word about evaluating or protecting the bloodline from any of you, these documents become public knowledge. Consider that your only warning."
He left the council chamber with Mireya, who'd been listening from an antechamber. "That was terrifying," she said. "Good. They should be terrified." He pulled her close. "No one threatens our family. No one." His wolf rumbled agreement, fierce and protective. For 8 years it had been dormant, waiting. Now it had everything it ever wanted, and it would destroy anyone who tried to take that away. Mireya went into labor on a cold winter night, 3 weeks before her due date. Kael was with her immediately, holding her hand, his wolf pacing anxiously just beneath his skin. "It's too early," he kept saying. 3 weeks too early. "Is that normal? Should we be worried?" "Triplets often come early," the head healer assured him. "This is actually good timing, not too early to be dangerous, but soon enough that they won't get too large for a safe delivery." The labor lasted 14 hours. Kael stayed by Mireya's side the entire time, talking to her, supporting her, letting her crush his hand during contractions. "You're doing so well," he murmured during a brief rest period. "So strong." "Easy for you to say," Mireya panted. "You're the one pushing 3 wolves out of your body." He laughed despite the tension. "Fair point." When the first baby crowned, Kael's wolf surged forward, desperate to see. "It's a boy," the healer announced, "strong and healthy." The baby's cry filled the room, loud and furious. "That's an alpha cry," Kael said, awe in his voice. 15 minutes later, the second baby arrived. "Another boy," the healer called, "just as strong." And 20 minutes after that, the third. "A girl!" The healer was laughing now, tears streaming down her face. "Your Majesty, you have 3 perfect, healthy babies. 2 boys and a girl." Mireya collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but smiling. The healers cleaned and wrapped the babies, then brought them to their parents. Kael held all 3 with the careful reverence of someone holding the most precious things in the world. 2 identical boys with dark hair like their father, and a girl with her mother's lighter coloring. All 3 opened their eyes, and all 3 had the distinctive golden wolf glow. 3 alphas, Kael breathed. "My wolf was right. They're all alphas." "That's impossible," one of the younger healers whispered. "Triplets are rare enough, but 3 alpha children from the same birth?" "Nothing about this family is ordinary," the head healer said with a smile. "These children are touched by the moon goddess herself." Kael carefully placed the babies in Mireya's arms. She looked down at their 3 perfect faces and felt the bond she already shared with Kael expand to encompass them. 4 souls tied together by blood and moon and love. "What should we name them?" Kael asked softly. Mireya had been thinking about this for months. "The boys, Alaric and Damon," she said, "and our daughter, Lyanna." "Alaric, Damon, and Lyanna," Kael repeated, testing the names. "Perfect. Strong names for strong children." His wolf grumbled approval. These were his cubs, his legacy, the future of the kingdom. And anyone who threatened them would face the full fury of an Alpha King who'd waited 30 years to find his purpose. The announcement went out at dawn. The Queen has safely delivered triplets, 2 princes and 1 princess, all healthy. The royal line is secured. The kingdom exploded with celebration. Bonfires were lit, feasts were held. Wolves from every territory howled their joy to the moon. The cursed king wasn't cursed. The infertile Alpha had produced 3 perfect heirs, and the Omega who'd been forced into marriage as punishment had become the most celebrated Luna in generations. In the palace, Kael and Mireya sat together in her recovery chamber, their 3 babies sleeping peacefully in enchanted cradles that rocked themselves. "We did it," Mireya said quietly. "You did it," Kael corrected. "You survived a forced marriage, political attacks, pregnancy complications, and labor with triplets. You're incredible."
We survived it together." She leaned against his shoulder. "That's what balance means, remember? We face things together." "Together," he agreed. His wolf settled into contentment, watching over its mate and cubs. For 8 years it had rejected every mate offered because none of them understood what it truly needed. Not submission, not dominance, balance, partnership. A mate who would stand beside it as an equal, not bow before it as a subordinate. It had waited, and in waiting it had found exactly what it needed. An Omega who challenged councils and cited constitutional law. An Omega who treated a fierce wolf like a wounded soul that needed healing. An Omega who gave the cursed king 3 perfect children and a future he'd stopped believing in. Outside, the kingdom celebrated. Inside, a family slept peacefully. And in the council chambers, Lord Theron and his allies realized they'd lost. The cursed king was cursed no more, and the Omega they'd meant to humiliate had just secured her position as the most powerful Luna in the kingdom's history. Fate, it seemed, had the last laugh. 5 years later, the triplets' naming ceremony was held under the full moon. Alaric, Daemon, and Lyanna stood before the assembled kingdom, 5 years old and already showing the strength of their alpha blood. Alaric was serious and thoughtful, already showing signs of his father's strategic mind. Daemon was fierce and protective, his wolf surging close to the surface whenever his siblings were threatened. And Lyanna was brilliant and bold, with her mother's sharp intellect and her father's commanding presence. 3 perfect children. 3 future leaders. During the ceremony, Alpha King Kael addressed the kingdom. 5 years ago, I was called cursed, infertile, broken. His voice carried across the assembled crowd. My wolf rejected every mate the council chose because they chose wrong. They chose dominance when my wolf needed balance. They chose ambition when my wolf needed peace. He turned to Mireya, who stood beside him holding Lyanna's hand, while the boys flanked their father. And then the council, in their arrogance, tried to punish an Omega who dared challenge them. They forced her into marriage with me, expecting her to fail, expecting humiliation. Kael smiled. Instead, that Omega gave me 3 children, secured the succession, and taught this kingdom an important lesson. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze landing on Lord Theron and the other council members who'd orchestrated Mireya's forced marriage. Sometimes what looks like a curse is actually a blessing waiting to be recognized. Sometimes what looks like punishment is actually fate correcting course. And sometimes the thing you think will destroy you is exactly what saves you. The crowd was silent, listening. My wolf wasn't broken. It was waiting for her. He pulled Mireya close, for the Omega who would treat it with respect instead of fear, who would offer partnership instead of demanding submission, who would be brave enough to stand beside a cursed king and love him anyway. Mireya looked up at him, tears in her eyes. You saved me, Kael said quietly, just for her. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, she corrected. And it was true. Kael had given Mireya a voice, a platform, a partnership. Mireya had given Kael peace, balance, a family. Together, they'd built something the kingdom had never seen, a true balanced bond between Alpha and Omega, where both were equal partners in power. The ceremony concluded with the traditional howl, every wolf in the kingdom raising their voices to the moon in celebration, and 3 small voices joined in, Alaric, Daemon, and Lyanna, their young wolves already strong and sure, the future of the kingdom, born from a bond that started with punishment and transformed into the greatest love story the realm had ever known.
This is the story of Kael and Mireya, a story about patience and timing, about wolves that know what they need even when their humans don't, about the difference between dominance and balance, between submission and partnership. The council called Kael cursed because his wolf rejected every powerful alpha female they presented. But his wolf wasn't broken. It was discerning. It knew that true strength doesn't come from dominating a mate, but from finding someone who balances you, someone who challenges you without threatening you, someone who offers peace without demanding surrender. Mireya was forced into marriage as punishment, expected to fail, expected to be rejected like all the others. Instead, she did something revolutionary. She didn't try to tame the wolf. She tried to understand it. She offered respect without fear, kindness without weakness, partnership without power plays. And the wolf, the fierce, dominant, powerful alpha wolf that had rejected everyone else, bowed, not in submission, in recognition of strength, of equality, of finally finding home. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the sacred bond between wolf and mate, through the power of balance and the miracle of patience. Until next time, may you recognize strength in all its forms. May you find the one who balances rather than breaks you. And may you remember the thing that looks like a curse might just be a blessing waiting for the right moment to reveal itself.